They say that you can have too much of a good thing, and that rings true when it comes to certain film franchises. For a multitude of different reasons, once a series hits top form, it can be damn hard to keep it up. Some have gone from good to bad, while others have gone from sensational to the point of what scientists are calling big poopy butt time. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are a few great movie franchises that became unwatchable. Also, yeah, sorry if I sound really weird for this. I'm kind of recovering from winter flu, so that's why I sound like I'm dying, is basically what I'm trying to say here. Although, I probably usually sound like I'm dying in a What Culture list video. Anyway, please just be kind, you know? It's Christmas. It's Christmas! First up, it's Kingsman. When Kingsman: The Secret Service released in 2014, it was a hugely enjoyable surprise success. Matthew Vaughn brought to life a bombastic espionage flick that didn't take itself too seriously, featured an all-time classic action scene, and pretty much launched Taron Egerton's career. However, since 2014, the franchise has taken something of a nosedive, starting with the sequel, The Golden Circle. That film leaned way too far into the over-the-top nature of the original to pretty much the point of parody, losing much of the charm from 3 years before. The spin-off, The Kingsman, meanwhile, wasn't able to bring much of anything to the table either, in spite of having a really good cast. After a surprisingly forgettable 2 hours, the only thing anyone really remembers it for is the post-credit scene that introduced Adolf Hitler like he was Thanos. A real low point for the shared universe slop era, and that's saying something when you remember we had stuff like the Tom Cruise Mummy and also the Eternals. Oh my god, the movies, why'd they do this to us? But yeah, brief existential crisis aside, as far as the franchise goes, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was the end. But no, a post-credit scene in Matthew Vaughn's Argylle connected the 2024 flop to the Kingsman films, something that will likely never come to fruition thanks to the poor response to both Argylle and the post-Secret Service Kingsman franchise. The moral of the story here? Don't bet on Mark Miller for more than one movie, tops, because yeah, it's just not gonna work out. On the way, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In 1974, Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released, and horror cinema was never the same. A genuine contender for being the greatest film ever made, and no, that's not me doing a bit, it's an indie filmmaking masterpiece. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre spawned a litany of sequels in the decades following its phenomenal opening film, with only 2 of those really cutting the mustard. Hooper's tonally divergent Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 for one, and then the gnarly 2003 Platinum Dunes remake, which is also actually shot by the guy who did the cinematography on the original film, which is a pretty cool connection. Really interesting experiment as a movie, even if you don't care for what it changes from the original. And also, yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 gave us Chop Top, and that makes it the best movie ever made, so yeah. But in and amongst those 3 shining stars, we've had middling threequels, remake prequels, and insipid legacy sequels, and also, well, whatever the hell this was. Do your thing, cuz! The series now has multiple different timelines, prequels, different versions of the same story, but it all boils down to the same problem. Namely, is there much of a point to Texas Chainsaw Massacre without Tobe Hooper? I don't think so. Next up, Rambo. All too often, when a sequel follows a powerful and popular film, it tends to miss the point of what made it so special in the first place, which is very much the case with Rambo, although there is some nuance here which I'll get to now. Ted Kotcheff's First Blood was an adaptation of the book of the same name written by David Morrell, with Sylvester Stallone playing the role of traumatized Vietnam veteran John Rambo. While originally conceived as a gritty, faithful adaptation, Stallone made some key alterations to the film, namely changing Rambo from a frenzied figure to someone more vulnerable and ultimately less tragic. In the book, Rambo gets killed, whereas in the film, he lives after relaying his wartime experiences. And also, interesting thing on this, if you want to see a more faithful Rambo adaptation, I can heartily recommend William Friedkin's The Hunted, which stars Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro, and yeah, great movie, really underrated. Go watch that if you're after some depressing deconstruction of post-war trauma and also really gnarly knife fights. Go watch The Hunted. The Hunted is wonderful. But yeah, getting back on track, despite being a big difference in terms of portrayal, the first Rambo film is still very much an anti-war picture, one that dwells on the dehumanization of soldiers and, in particular, that post-Vietnam context. The sequels, though, well, yeah, they took a different path altogether, and that's like saying something. First Blood Part 2, in the midst of the hysterical Vietnam POW movement of the 1980s, sent the protagonist back to Vietnam to essentially relitigate the conflict. A great action movie, mind, it's complete spectacle, but it is a perversion of Morel's book. Same with Rambo 3, a movie I love for all of its gonzo stupidity and technical flexing, but which felt like a Cold War relic even during its production. But again, counterpoint to that, Rambo does kill a helicopter by ramming a tank into it, so checkmate. Even the 2008 Rambo was pretty fun, but by the time we got to 2019's Last Blood, the franchise was well and truly bled dry. On the way, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger is one of the most instantly recognizable film characters of all time. The scarred face, the bladed glove, the attitude, his Scottish accent. Oh wait, no, that was The Simpsons. Regardless, we love Freddy. He's an icon. While the idea of haunting children in their dreams is a terrifying one inherently, it was Robert Englund's Freddy who carried the original film in 1984. Without him or his cheesy one-liners, there would have been no franchise to speak of. However, this is something of a double-edged sword because if all a franchise has is that one character, no matter how popular they are, it is gonna wear thin eventually. Again, while the first 3 Nightmare films are all really solid, with the third, Dream Warriors, being my favorite of the franchise, diminishing returns soon set in, and with it, Freddy Mania started to evaporate. There was Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was amazing, but that was followed with the crossover with Friday the 13th's Jason, and it was followed by a 2010 remake that changed Freddy, changed the story, and was received so badly that it killed the franchise dead. Maybe 15 years is long enough to wait for another attempt, but the campy 80s feel was integral to making that series so good, and without that, it feels like any more nightmares that may come will probably fall flat. That said, it does feel kind of weird no one's successfully attempted a Blumhouse Halloween with this one. Robert Englund is still fantastic, and it would be great to have him in the old sweater-glove combo once again. Maybe do a story about how none of us are sleeping anymore because of screen time addiction, maybe? I don't know, there's some gold out there for someone smarter than me to work with. I just want to see Freddy back on the big screen. We've had Freddy, now it's time for Jason. Friday the 13th. The other side of the aforementioned Freddy vs. Jason coin is, of course, Jason Voorhees, who himself wasn't actually the main villain of the original Friday the 13th. The 1980 slasher legend saw Jason's mother Pamela, played by Betsy Palmer, avenging her son's death, and you could argue that the franchise was never the same after Jason himself returned. This brought the supernatural element into play that, while working for Freddy Krueger, did cause some serious problems for Jason, with the exception of Jason Lives, which is an absolute stone-cold slasher movie classic and a great time all around. In a frustratingly similar path to A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th was watered down by way too many sequels, before underwhelming in what should have been an epic crossover with Robert Englund's character, and then getting the remake treatment in 2009. The property had spent years spinning its wheels since that redo, with the in-development Crystal Lake TV show now on the way next year, and hoping to revitalize the franchise. It's The Predator! This is actually the only entry on this list that needs to come with the caveat that things have actually turned around quite drastically in recent years. With Dan Trachtenberg at the helm, Prey, Predator Killer of Killers, and Predator Badlands have all been smash hits, and light years ahead of what the franchise was rustling up in the 2000s and 2010s. Predator in 1987 was Arnie at his best, pitted against the Outja in a fight to the death, and it was compelling, adrenaline pumping, and exactly what it needed to be. Again, obligatory UN list mention of John McTiernan being the GOAT. Despite this being an obvious Stone Cold classic, I still think it gets underappreciated. I think we take this movie for granted, and Arnie and John McTiernan too. Just a great streak of films in that late 80s to early 90s period. And also, while definitely a step down from McTiernan's film, Stephen Hopkins' Predator 2 made some vital contributions to the franchise, expanding the lore, giving us an infinitely quotable Gary Busey performance, and also this amazing behind-the-scenes video of all the Outja dancing with Danny Glover, which I will cherish forever, because it is a thing of beauty. Should have left it in the movie. It would have made perfect sense after they have that little love-in at the end. Flash forward to Alien vs Predator and AVP2, and on second thoughts, don't do that because they're really bad. And then Predators, and then the concept of Predator was just being pure wasted. Shane Black looked like the guy to bring it back, but the Predator in 2018 managed to waste an impressively stacked cast on something cringe with a capital C. Ah well, at least we're safe now. Next up, Terminator. From one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's biggest films in the 1980s to another now. 3 years before appearing as Dutch in Predator, the megastar played the T-800 in what is now considered his most iconic and appreciated role, though even he couldn't save Terminator Dark Fate or Terminator Genesis or Genesis. Bad movies, bad. This is an example of a movie studio so desperate to milk a cash cow for all it's worth, regardless of how good the actual movies are, that said cash cow gets run into the ground and destroyed. This after having an incredible start followed up by one of the consensus greatest sequels of all time. Yeah, another case of they probably should have just left it at part 2 and called it a day. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines wasn't terrible, but it did suffer from the expectations of following T2 Judgment Day. The issue was that it completely undermined the message of what came before it, that fate is what you make of it, and from there, the franchise just seemingly didn't know what to do with itself. Across Terminator Salvation, Genesis, and Dark Fate, it felt as though it was a case of throwing enough at a wall and seeing what would maybe stick. Retcons, different timelines, multiple variations of John Connor, as well as the return of Arnie and Linda Hamilton in 2019's Dark Fate, were all peddled out to audiences, and you could argue that things genuinely got worse with each one, although, yeah, Genesis is probably still the absolute worst thing ever. Terrible movie. Next up, Ant-Man. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was already 11 movies and 7 years deep when Ant-Man released, and yet it still managed to feel unique and mostly original. A Paul Rudd-led true comedy heist film that introduced a new solo lead character for the first time since Captain America: The First Avenger. No, Ant-Man is probably unlikely to be too many people's favorite MCU movie, but it was a fun outing that offered something new to proceedings. Ant-Man and the Wasp followed in the same footsteps, though outside of properly introducing Hope Van Dyne's Wasp, it couldn't quite reach the heights of its predecessor, and that's with Walton Goggins being there too. Like, if you add Walton Goggins to your movie and it isn't an improvement on the previous thing, then that's a bad reflection on you, buddy. That's a bad reflection. Not on Walton Goggins, I love it, but on the movie overall. The Gogmeister will improve everything he touches. That is a conviction I've held since The Hateful Eight. But yeah, Walton Goggins loving aside, it is the third Ant-Man movie where things really fell apart. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania shoved Hope back into a supporting role, giving her barely anything to do, seemingly forgot that it was supposed to be a comedy, and it relied far too heavily on CGI that wasn't really up to par. Like, look at MODOK. Look at how they massacred my boy. My square-faced, hovery boy. Oh god, Marvel, how the mighty have fallen. After a largely underwhelming Phase 4, Quantumania was chosen to kick off Phase 5 thanks to its introduction of the then next big bad, Jonathan Majors Kang, the Conqueror. And yeah, if there was a more appropriate place to drop the Curb Your Enthusiasm clanger music in this list, I'd let you know. On the way, Halloween. Here, you can feel free to file Michael Myers next to Leatherface, Freddy Krueger, and Jason Voorhees under the file of oversaturated horror movie villains. Michael's first outing was legendary, and like with the other slasher entries on this list, is the reason the franchise keeps getting revisited. Also, in a similar way to Terminator, the Halloween series has seen a ridiculous amount of different timelines within its 13 movies. There are mini trilogies, films that ignore the canon of other films, detours away from Myers himself, and even Jamie Lee Curtis going out of her way to ask for Laurie Strode to be killed. I'll let you in on a little secret though, those Cult of Thorn movies are genuinely hilarious. Like, I'm just saying that as a Halloween diehard. Also, obviously, Season of the Witch is a banger too. It's just, yeah, there's probably like 4 out of the 13 movies that are genuinely great, which is not a great batting average, but hey, when it's good, it's really good. The vast majority of these series have started high and gradually declined over time, sometimes more drastically than others. However, Halloween saw something of a renaissance in 2018 with Halloween. It didn't last long, of course, as although I controversially really like Halloween Kills, Ends kind of goosed things up by playing way too heavily with fan-servicey nostalgia with its third act, despite on paper being the most interesting entry in the franchise since Halloween 3. And now they're making a TV show too. I mean, as long as John Carpenter keeps getting his checks, I guess that's alright by me. Next up, Transformers. While Michael Bay has been a bit of a punching bag in online movie circles for a heck of a long time now, the dude can make some seriously good action cinema. The Rock, Bad Boys, the first at least, both great action movies, and he only recently-ish directed his best film yet with the Jake Gyllenhaal starring Ambulance, which, if you know, you know. And also, that first Transformers movie is really damn good too. Just on a pure effects level blockbuster kind of thing, to have that many digital effects going and to still make it all feel so tangible, that's really impressive. And Bay one-upped that with the third Transformers film, which again, annoying Shia LaBeoufness aside, is insane in the best ways. Everything after though? Oh, brother. Bad. Bay's worst impulses got dialed up repeatedly in his last couple of Transformers movies, and despite making $1 squadillion between them, neither Age of Extinction nor The Last Knight were really up to much guff. That being said, they did give us that hilarious bit where Anthony Hopkins gets absolutely annihilated for some reason. Like, he just goes flying, it's so excessive. Like, Anthony, no, get out of there. But yeah, outside of that, Transformers did bounce back with Bumblebee, but then we had Rise of the Beasts, which, if you put that next to Bay's movies, the difference in terms of tangibility and physicality is night and day. One's a movie, and the other is a game. Who you gonna call? Not Ghostbusters anymore. Ghostbusters is one of those 1980s classics that needed absolutely no further sequels after so many decades, and that was all but guaranteed when legacy sequels began to grow more and more popular. To the surprise of nobody, the magic was not recaptured. Despite having the rep of being one of the most disappointing movie sequels of all time, there's a lot to love about Ghostbusters 2, and it turned the franchise into a happy duology. But 27 years later, the pull was too strong to return to the franchise. In 2016, we got Paul Feig's Ghostbusters, which may have taken us into the darkest timeline because, dear God, 2016, what a time. And despite not being terrible, it also wasn't good either. However, even when the original timeline was continued in 2021, led by Paul Rudd, things didn't get much better, with director Jason Reitman delivering an overly saccharine and stuffy movie that seemingly forgot Ghostbusters wasn't meant to be depressing. It was funny. There's absolutely nothing funny about a CGI Harold Ramis being puppeted around next to his surviving cast members. It's ghoulish. Even done with the best intentions, it just doesn't feel good. Frozen Empire followed this up and was also just kind of joyless. Better CGI and the return of Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and Dan Aykroyd weren't enough to inspire anything better than another by-the-numbers legacy sequel, one that was both a disappointment at the box office and with critics to boot. Next up, Despicable Me. When Despicable Me released as the first Illumination film back in 2010, it was lauded as a wonderfully fun family romp, putting the eccentric Gru, played by Steve Carell, at the center of the story. As a villain, he was rightly despicable, but he learned to be a father, which was nothing short of heartwarming. And the Minions, well, they certainly were a thing too. You know, before the whole Minion meme thing became a thing, they had their charms, they were okay. So as we established before, there can be too much of a good thing, and since that first outing, there have been 3 more Despicable Me chapters, as well as 2 Minions movies, with a 3rd coming in the next few years. And again, genuine question here, is everyone else also sick of the Minions, or are they so cringe they're fun again? They used to be cute and funny back in the day, but as their role grew and grew, they became less and less appealing, and have now pushed Gru to being a side character in their 2nd film. I mean, again, I shouldn't be invested in this, it's Despicable Me, and the Minions have been going for a long time now, but are we pro or anti-Minion? I need to know, let me know in the comments below. Next up, Thor. As a close frontrunner with Hulk, Thor was one of the most well-known heroes that came together to make Marvel Studios' Avengers back in 2012. The character was instantly popular, and he became an integral part of the MCU going forward. The God of Thunder's self-titled first solo movie was a strong opening, though The Dark World is widely regarded as one of the weakest the wider MCU franchise has to offer. Even in spite of that though, there were strong moments between Thor and Loki in that movie, and it was integral to the Thor character remaining such a big part of the larger puzzle. But in came Taika Waititi for the threequel, Thor Ragnarok, which breathed new life into the son of Odin, into the Thor franchise overall, and became one of the most popular MCU films ever. Instantly, Thor was back at the top, but unfortunately, even as Hemsworth admitted, he and Waititi delved too deep into the goofy and silly side for Thor Love and Thunder, which really stings me because it adapted one of my favorite Marvel comics of the last 2 decades, which, if you're familiar with that comic, you'll know it's deeply serious. There's a lot of fun stuff in there too, but it's also meant to be full of pathos and emotion, and that didn't really come through in the movie. The 4th Thor film is one of the biggest disappointments in Marvel movie history, and took the character from being one of the hottest properties under Kevin Feige's umbrella to having no one asking to see another standalone Thor film anytime soon. The Thunder God will surely make a splash again in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, but that will likely be it, and honestly, it's probably for the best. Next up, Paranormal Activity. Yet another horror movie franchise on this list that proves this kind of lightning simply cannot strike twice. Paranormal Activity was unique when it released in 2007, combining the supernatural and found footage aspects of the subgenres, and audiences went nuts for it. Naturally, the more films that were released, the less unique the stories became. It also didn't help that there were so many movies thrown out so quickly, which is quite ironic, as typically it's the longer gaps that tend to cause issues. With the magic well and truly lost from the Paranormal Activity franchise, particularly after entries released in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, and 2015, there was a break before the last and most recent one, titled Next of Kin. By this time, the concept was well and truly tired, and audiences were bored of it. It would seem there's only so much that you can do with this kind of setup and idea, and yeah, the Paranormal Activity well has well and truly kind of run dry. On the way, Jaws. These days, you can all but guarantee that any film that sees success will get a sequel. The industry is obsessed with them, arguably now more so than ever before. But this isn't exactly a new phenomenon. Even a story with as little need for a sequel as Jaws, released all the way back in 1975, was given a follow-up just 3 years later. Jaws 2 is notoriously one of the most unnecessary movie sequels ever made, but also in the grand canon of Jaws-ness, it's actually pretty great. Jaws 2 is a fun time at the movies, I promise you. But from that point on, the quality, if Jaws 1 is like a masterpiece and then Jaws 2 is like a good time at the movies, then Jaws 3 is like all the way down here. It just keeps going. It's really bad. You don't want to watch Jaws 3, trust me. Or maybe you do if you're a sicko. Go watch Jaws 3 if you're a sicko. That's my endorsement anyway. Jaws 3D, I actually kind of think is worse than Jaws the Revenge, just purely because of all the hokey 3D effects work and how bad Dennis Quaid is in the movie as Chief Brody's son. But yeah, let's talk about the Revenge anyway as well, because it's just not a good time. Obviously, Rotten Tomatoes scores aren't everything, but in this case, it does paint a pretty vivid picture of just how bad these movies got. Michael Caine was at least able to buy his mother a new house out of Jaws the Revenge, but if this is the main takeaway that star has from a project, then, well, you know it's pretty bad. Next up, Star Wars. So, let's get this out of the way first. There is no pleasing every single Star Wars fan. There are those original trilogy diehards who say that nothing good has been done since 1983. There are those who think nothing good has been done since 2005. And then you have freaks like me who love The Phantom Menace most of all. My fellow children of Jar Jar, I see you and I love you. And yeah, speaking as a Star Wars fan, there are only really two major movie lows to me in this franchise, and that's Attack of the Clones and The Rise of Skywalker. But at least the former has a lot of that George Lucas madness going for it. Episode 9 is nothing. It's worse than nothing and actively undermines every movie that came before and feels like it was structured on an Etch-a-Sketch. It is without doubt the apex of lazy franchise blockbuster storytelling and probably the most embarrassing film to have dropped within the last 15 years. It's tacky and I hate it. And yeah, things haven't gotten much better on the small screen either. Mandalorian Season 3 was a total washout. Kenobi wasted the bring back Ewan McGregor juice on a TV show that looked like it was made with the budget of a cup of Jawa juice and a prayer. And now we're at the point where the next big Star Wars movie is a spin-off of a TV show that has probably overstayed its welcome by about 2 years. Unwatchable is inherently hyperbolic as a phrase, and I do think there's some iffy revisionism going on with the Disney era overall, but it's genuinely painful to see Star Wars like this now. Despite highlights like Andor and Visions, the franchise is in a very sorry place. I never thought there'd be a time where I'd pass up the opportunity to watch a Star Wars movie in theaters, but here it is. It's here. And that's really sad. From one Lucasfilm clanger to another, it's Indiana Jones. From one space opera to the most legendary archaeologist to ever grace the screen. In the same way that Harrison Ford made Han Solo as lovable and popular as he became, Indiana Jones also benefited greatly from a wonderful piece of casting magic. Between 1981 and 1989, there were 3 Indiana Jones films released, all 3 of which could easily lay claim to being the best in the series. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull isn't without its charms either, and gave Indy a genuinely happy send-off. And then we had Dial of Destiny, which was probably one of the most miserable cinematic experiences I've ever had in my life. That, again, probably sounds a bit OTT, but I was confronted with such a sense of profound existential sadness watching that movie that made me question everything. On the upside, probably no more Indiana Jones movies are gonna get made, but on the downside, why'd it have to go out like that? It's really bad. Next up, Pirates of the Caribbean. Back in 2003, nobody could have predicted just what a critical, commercial, and pop culture phenomenon a Pirates of the Caribbean movie would be. And yet, with Johnny Depp leading things as the beloved Captain Jack Sparrow, this quickly became one of Disney's greatest ever assets. Following The Curse of the Black Pearl came the rest of a trilogy that brought life to the high seas, perfectly balancing the eccentricity of Captain Jack and the darkness of the supernatural element that was so integral to those stories. While it was Jack who was at the front and center for the most part, the franchise suffered greatly from the loss of Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley. Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann were essential characters, and the fourth Pirates film, On Stranger Tides, fell horrifically flat without them. Marketed as bringing them back 6 years later, Dead Men Tell No Tales not only featured the duo for just a few scenes each, it also wasted Javier Bardem, produced a post-credits scene that no one cared about, even with the prospect of a Davy Jones return, and put the final nail in the franchise's watery coffin. There has been talk of a return since, with either Margot Robbie or Johnny Depp leading the way, but it's far more likely that this would only make things worse if it were to ever happen at all. Next up, Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is one of the most iconic and influential movies of all time, with special effects that still hold up over 30 years later, moments that can genuinely make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Unfortunately, since 1993, the franchise has only gotten steadily worse. The Lost World Jurassic Park was fine as sequels go, certainly nothing close to the same level as the original, but it was enjoyable enough and also had Pete Postlethwaite, so yeah. Jurassic Park 3, however, I really like Jurassic Park 3, but again, it's just no contest if you're talking about, it going up against the original. The real criminal in this narrative of Jurassic Park degradation, though, is the Jurassic World reboot. The first Jurassic World movie was a safe entry that relied more on its name than anything terribly groundbreaking. It set the stage for what could have been a strong trilogy, but Fallen Kingdom was bad and Dominion was even worse. The franchise as a whole, with Chris Pratt at the forefront, became based around generic action that just happened to have dinosaurs in it and also a lot of product placement. And even the dinosaurs were put into more of a backseat role than ever with Dominion, despite having the opportunity to explore having them free in the world. Netflix's Chaos Theory did this better than the film, which again is kind of wild given it's just a kids' TV show. And now we appear to be going around again, as Rebirth has offered a similarly safe and forgettable new side of the franchise. But with the money it made, it feels as though another poor sequel is inevitable. Last up, we have Die Hard. Hell yeah, John McTiernan mentioned again. McTiernan's action masterpiece Die Hard is iconic, still holds up to this day as wildly entertaining, and is relevant even beyond the debates about whether or not it is a Christmas film. And please do not destroy the comment section with that debate, it's very boring. While never reaching quite the same heights as the original, Die Hard 2 is a great time, and Die Hard with a Vengeance is actually my pick for my favorite in the franchise. You knew what you were getting with John McClane, and it was gonna be good. Then, as with way too many that take a break of a few years or decades, Die Hard was brought back as a shadow of its former self. Pitting Bruce Willis's McClane against a technological threat for Live Free or Die Hard was what you could expect, but it didn't feel like an actual Die Hard movie, given it was PG-13. Having said that, Live Free or Die Hard is a work of art compared with the fifth and final film, with which the franchise limped over the finishing line. A good day to Die Hard. John and his son Jack, played by Jai Courtney, essentially led a underwhelming, generic, and forgettable outing. And when you're in the Die Hard canon, that just makes everything even worse. A sad end to a great franchise, and yeah, makes me appreciate Lethal Weapon 4 even more. That's a good franchise ending right there. Just gonna go ahead and say it. Lethal Weapon 4? Underrated. Just to end the list on a more positive note. God, I've got flu madness right now. Take care, bye.